I never believed in ghosts, not until we moved into that old farmhouse on the edge of town. The woods behind it seemed innocent enough during the day, but at night, they whispered secrets I couldn't ignore. My husband, John, brushed off my concerns, chalking them up to stress from the move. But I knew better. Our daughter, Emily, started talking to someone or something only she could see. At first, I thought it was an imaginary friend, but her conversations grew more sinister, filled with warnings about the whispering woman. One night, as I tucked Emily into bed, she asked me why the woman in the woods was crying. I froze, my heart pounding. I couldn't hear anything, but Emily insisted the woman was sad because she lost her baby. Determined to find answers, I delved into the town's history and uncovered a tragic tale. The Whispering Woman, a grieving mother who lost her child centuries ago. Legend had it she lured other children into the woods, hoping to find her own lost baby among them. As the days passed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. I started seeing shadows moving among the trees, felt a cold presence watching me from the darkness. John remained skeptical, dismissing my fears as overactive imagination. One stormy night, Emily disappeared. Frantic, I ran into the woods, guided by the faint glow of a lantern. I found her standing at the edge of a clearing, talking to the whispering woman, or what I thought was her. The woman's face was obscured, but I could feel her sorrow, her longing. I begged her to let Emily go, to find peace. In that moment, the air grew still, the whispers ceased. The woman turned to me, her expression unreadable, and then she vanished, leaving behind an eerie silence. The next morning, Emily was back, as if nothing had happened. John was quick to dismiss it as a bad dream, but I knew better. The woods were quiet now, the whispers gone. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right, I swear I can still hear her voice, a haunting reminder of a mother's grief.
I remember that night so vividly, the night everything changed. The air was heavy with the promise of rain, and the moon hung low, casting eerie shadows across the deserted streets. I was walking home from work, my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I turned the corner onto my street, I saw a figure standing under the flickering streetlight. It was a man, tall and imposing, his features hidden by darkness. My heart skipped a beat, but I told myself it was just my imagination running wild. I quickened my pace, eager to get home and away from the unsettling presence. But as I passed him, he grabbed my arm with a strength that took my breath away. I tried to scream, but his hand clamped down over my mouth, muffling the sound. He dragged me into an alleyway, his grip like iron. I could smell the alcohol on breath as he leaned in close, his face inches from mine. "You shouldn't have walked home alone," he hissed, his voice sending shivers down my spine. I struggled, but he was too strong. He pushed me to the ground, his hands tightening around my throat. I gasped for air, my vision blurring, as he leaned over me, his face contorted with rage. And then, just as I thought it was over, a gunshot rang out, splitting the night air in two. The man fell to the ground, a look of shock on his face, and blood pooled around him. I looked up to see a figure standing over us, a gun in their hand. It was my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, his eyes wide with horror. "I saw everything," he said, his voice trembling. I had to do something. The police arrived soon after, and I was taken to the station to give my statement. They told me the man had been a wanted serial killer, responsible for 7 murders in the area. I would have been his 8th victim. I never walked home alone at night again, haunted by the memory of that horrific encounter. But I was grateful, knowing that there are still good people in the world willing to risk everything to protect others.
I, 16, and my brother, 19, were home alone one night, messing around and playing video games until around 4 a.m. After calling it a night, I went into my room, which is connected to his room by a shared bathroom, and I suddenly got an intense feeling that I should lock my door. I never lock my door, ever, but for some reason something inside me was screaming too. I faintly heard a man making a shh noise, and my dog growling slightly, but he didn't bark, which was weird because he always freaks out whenever someone comes into the living room, even my brother. Then my doorknob starts rattling violently. Not your typical trying to open a door rattle, it was crazy, like the door handle was tweaking on meth or something. I thought it was my brother playing some stupid trick, but I ran straight to his room through the bathroom in a matter of 2 seconds, and he was still sitting there, headphones on, and playing video games. He couldn't possibly have made it back in time. I started shouting hysterically about how it wasn't funny, and he was dead confused. Armed with a flashlight and a Batman action figure, we went back to my room. The doorknob was still high and tweaking on crystal meth. My brother reached out and touched the door, and felt a shock. And just like that, the rattling stopped. I slept with my door locked the next couple nights, and it happened another 2 or 3 times, and then it just stopped. My brother, on the other hand, thought he became a ghostbuster.
When I worked at a gas station on 31 and Center, I was in a bad place in life. It happened at 1 a.m. on a very cold night several years ago. I was in the back getting the news that my boyfriend of 3 years had been seeing another girl behind my back, and he was dumping me for her. I was alone in the store, too cold for people on a Tuesday. The snow barely fell outside, but it was perfect outside the doors. I was crying, and I am ashamed to say, begging. When he hung up on me, I had a mortifying thought that someone was in the store. I went out to check and saw no one. I need to say this again. No one was in the store. I was alone. Shoplifting mirrors checked and everything. I was relieved. I said out loud that I was going to kill myself, and at that moment, I meant it. Suddenly a voice came out of nowhere, and a man was standing on the other side of the counter, right in front of me, like directly in front of me. He was tall and strong-looking, but like work strong, not gym strong. He wore a jacket that looked like an old suit jacket over a thin hoodie. It was way too cold for that. Really, it was probably minus 25 degrees outside. He couldn't be outside like that. The more I looked at him, the more I realized he was gray. He seemed like old-time black and white gray. His gray hood was up, and he looked at me with gray eyes that seemed to fit in with the dangerously cold weather. He said, "Don't do that, Becca. There is a lot for you to do." Then he said to be careful what I say. He said, "Everything listens, or the universe listens or something." Then he smiled at me and walked out the front door. Not another word. I walked out after him. I had no idea what I was going to say, but he wasn't there. No footprints, no car tracks, nothing. The only footprints out there were mine walking after him. I don't know who or what he is, but I am grateful. He was there for me at the exact moment I needed him. Thank you, Gray Man.
There's an old farmhouse on Parsonsfield Road in Limerick my brother recently bought. My family and I ended up moving in with him, so everyone could save some money and work as a unit. The first night we were there, I had a really weird experience. Probably 6 to 10 times I woke up to what felt like someone tickling my hands. I brushed it off as being overtired from moving. The next few days there was a heavy energy on the 3rd floor I was staying on and couldn't shake it just feeling watched, really. Fast forward a few weeks. As I was making coffee at 4:30 in the morning, I could hear a conversation of many people, men and women. There was only one other person in the house at the time. It sounded as if it was coming through a baby monitor, and I couldn't find anything. After that, I asked my husband if he had experienced anything, and he told me he had seen a little boy standing by the window at the bottom of the hallway and heard people talking, but he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. That same night, I took a toy piano from my 2-year-old and put it in the barn. My brother had his girlfriend over who was out in the barn in the middle of the night, and she heard someone playing a piano. When she told me the next morning, I got chills. and we exchanged experiences we'd been having. She said she had heard a male voice say, "Thomas Lord." After doing research, I found a picture of a man named Thomas Lord in front of the village store, right down the road in the 1900s. After we acknowledged it, it seemed as though it got more intense. While I was doing my makeup or cooking, I'd get tapped or what felt like a hard poke in the leg or back. My brother's girlfriend had her hair pulled out of her ponytail. We chased noises and voices over and over again. One night my daughter, my husband, and I were sitting down for dinner, and I couldn't get her to stop playing and eat. I raised my voice, and immediately after I had finished my scolding, this ear-piercing, bloody murder scream came from nowhere. It was like a little girl or woman just shrieking as loud as they could. We all froze. Shortly after that, my brother came downstairs. I asked if he had heard the scream. He didn't hear anything. We were just mind blown. We've since moved, but still fascinated and confused by what we experienced.
I've been trucking for over a decade now, and I've seen my fair share of strange things on the road. But nothing comes close to what happened to me one night in the dead of winter. I was driving through the mountains, the snow coming down in thick, heavy flakes. The road was slick, and I was taking it slow, trying to make sure I didn't end up in a ditch. That's when I saw her. A woman, standing on the side of the road, her long dark hair blowing in the wind. I slowed down, thinking maybe she needed help. But as I got closer, I could see that something was off about her. Her eyes were hollow, empty, and she was wearing clothes that looked like they were from another era. I should have kept driving, but something compelled me to stop. I rolled down my window and asked if she needed a ride. She didn't say anything, just climbed into the cab of my truck and sat down next to me. I tried to make conversation, but she didn't respond. She just stared out the window, her expression unreadable. I was starting to get creeped out, but I kept driving, thinking maybe she was just cold and needed a warm place to rest. That's when things took a turn for the worse. As we rounded a bend in the road, I saw them. Dozens of figures, standing in the middle of the road, blocking my path. They were all dressed like the woman in my truck, their eyes empty, their faces expressionless. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. I plowed right through them, the sound of their bodies hitting the truck echoing in my ears. I looked in my rearview mirror, but there was nothing there. No bodies, no people, just an empty road stretching out behind me. I drove for hours, trying to make sense of what had happened. When I finally pulled into a truck stop, I was shaking with fear. I told the other drivers what I had seen, but they just laughed and said I must have been seeing things. But I know what I saw that night. I picked up a hitchhiker, a ghost from another time, and drove straight through a horde of the undead. And now, every time I close my eyes, I see their empty faces staring back at me, haunting me, reminding me of the night I drove through hell.
I was babysitting little Emily one stormy night. The rain was drumming against the windows and the wind was rattling the old house. Emily was asleep in her crib, and I was sitting in the living room, trying to distract myself from the eerie atmosphere by reading a book. Suddenly, I heard a noise coming from the nursery. It sounded like a soft giggle. I paused, listening intently. Another giggle followed, unmistakably coming from the nursery. My heart skipped a beat, but I tried to convince myself it was just the house settling. I got up slowly, trying not to make a sound, and made my way to the nursery. The door creaked open, revealing the dimly lit room. Emily was standing in her crib, staring at me with wide eyes. I could feel a chill run down my spine, but I tried to stay calm. "Hey there, Emily," I said softly, approaching the crib. "It's time to go back to sleep." Emily didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I reached out to pick her up when I heard it, a faint whisper so soft I almost didn't catch it. "Help me." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around the room, but there was no one else there. It must have been my imagination, I thought. I picked up Emily and started to rock her back to sleep when I heard it again. A whisper, so close it sounded like it was coming from right behind me. Help me, please. I turned around slowly, my heart in my throat. There, standing in the shadows, was a figure. A woman, dressed in tattered clothes, her face obscured by shadows. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, as she stepped closer, her hand reaching out towards me. "Help me," she whispered, her voice desperate. I stumbled back, dropping Emily in the crib. I turned and ran, the sound of my footsteps drowned out by the pounding of my heart. I didn't stop until I was outside, the rain soaking me to the bone. I called the police, but when they arrived, there was no sign of anyone else in the house. They told me it was probably just my imagination, but I knew what I saw, what I heard. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that something is still in that house, something that needs help. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind is howling and the rain is beating against the windows, I swear I can still hear that desperate whisper, pleading for help.
My name is Elijah, and my life has been a series of trials and tribulations. Growing up in the heart of New Orleans, poverty was a constant companion. I struggled to make ends meet, working odd jobs and scraping by just to survive. But I was determined to change my fate, to break free from the cycle of despair that had consumed me for so long. One day, while wandering the streets in search of work, I stumbled upon a small shop tucked away in a dimly lit alley. Inside, I met a voodoo priestess named Mama Laveau. She was a formidable woman, with piercing eyes that seemed to see straight into my soul. I told her of my hardships, and she listened intently, nodding as if she already knew my story. Mama Laveau offered to help me, but warned me that the path to change would not be easy. She spoke of the dark arts of voodoo, of the spirits that dwelled in the shadows, waiting to be called upon. Despite her warnings, I was desperate. I agreed to whatever it took to change my luck. Mama Laveau performed a ritual for me, chanting ancient incantations and sprinkling mysterious powders around the room. I felt a surge of energy, a glimmer of hope that had long been absent from my life. In the days that followed, my fortunes began to change. I found steady work, my health improved, and for the first time in my life, I had money in my pocket. But as time passed, I grew complacent. I forgot Mama Laveau's warning, and my newfound success went to my head. I began to indulge in luxuries I could never afford before, flaunting my wealth in the faces of those who had once looked down on me. I became arrogant, believing myself to be invincible. Then, one night, as I lay in bed, a chill crept over me. I opened my eyes to find myself surrounded by a thick fog. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and I could hear whispers, faint at first, but growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. Suddenly, the fog began to coalesce into shapes, forms of people I had wronged in my pursuit of wealth and power. They stared at me with accusing eyes, their mouths moving soundlessly as if trying to speak. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The figures drew closer, their eyes filled with anger and sorrow. They spoke to me, not with words, but with emotions that cut deep into my soul. They spoke of the pain and suffering I had caused, of the lives I had destroyed in my quest for more. I tried to plead with them, to beg for forgiveness, but they would not listen. They reached out to me, their hands icy cold to the touch. I felt a chill run down my spine as their fingers closed around my throat, choking the life out of me. I woke up gasping for air, drenched in sweat. It was just a dream, I told myself. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was a warning, a glimpse into the future if I did not change my ways. Terrified, I sought out Mama Laveau, hoping she could help me undo the curse she had placed upon me. But when I arrived at her shop, it was empty, the windows boarded up as if it had never been there. I was alone, haunted by the spirits of my past, and I knew then that I had to change. I had to make amends for the sins of my past, to seek redemption before it was too late. And so, I set out on a journey to find myself and to make things right, before the darkness consumed me completely. I'm glad. Determined to break free from the curse that haunted me, I embarked on a journey of redemption. I traveled far and wide, seeking out those I had wronged and trying to make amends. Some forgave me, while others turned me away, their pain too deep to heal. But with each act of kindness, with each apology, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. The spirits that had haunted me seemed to fade into the background, their presence less oppressive with each passing day. Eventually, I returned to New Orleans, a changed man. I had learned the true value of compassion and empathy, and I vowed never to stray from the path of righteousness again. As the years passed, I became known in the community as a man of integrity and kindness. I helped those in need, using my wealth and influence for the betterment of others. And though the memories of my past deeds still haunted me, I found solace in the knowledge that I was doing everything in my power to make things right. And so, I lived out the rest of my days in peace, knowing that I had overcome the darkness that once threatened to consume me. The curse had been broken, not by magic or incantations, but by the simple act of choosing to be a better man.
I remember the day I first laid eyes on that car. It was a vintage beauty, a 1958 Plymouth Fury, gleaming under the sunlight as if it had just rolled off the production line. The seller had warned me that the car was cursed, that it had a dark history of causing harm to its owners. But I was young and foolish, and the thrill of owning such a classic piece of automotive history clouded my judgment. At first, everything seemed fine. The car purred like a kitten, its engine smooth and powerful. But soon, strange things began to happen. I would hear whispers coming from the back seat, words I couldn't quite make out but that filled me with a sense of dread. The radio would turn on by itself, blaring static that seemed to form into eerie voices. One night, as I was driving home from work, the car suddenly veered off the road, as if guided by an invisible hand. I tried to regain control, but it was like the car had a mind of its own. It finally came to a stop at the edge of a cliff, the headlights shining into the abyss below. Terrified, I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped, at the mercy of this malevolent machine. Suddenly, the car started to shake violently as if possessed by a demon. I screamed for help, but there was no one around to hear me. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the shaking stopped. I sat there, trembling, unsure of what to do next. And then, with a deafening roar, the car lurched forward, hurtling towards the edge of the cliff. I closed my eyes, bracing for the impact, but it never came. When I opened them again, I was back on the road, the car parked by the side, as if nothing had happened. I got out, my legs shaking, and vowed never to drive that cursed car again. But the nightmares didn't end there. Every night, I would dream of that cliff, of the car hurtling towards the edge, and I would wake up drenched in sweat, the echoes of that deafening roar still ringing in my ears. I finally sold the car, desperate to be rid of it, but the nightmares persisted. As word spread about the cursed Plymouth Fury, people in the small town began to whisper about its dark past and the strange events surrounding it. Some dismissed it as superstition, but others, like me, knew there was something sinister about that car. One day a young couple came to see the car, oblivious to its history. They fell in love with it instantly and bought it on the spot, eager to restore it to its former glory. But their dreams of cruising down the highway in their classic car soon turned into a nightmare. The whispers grew louder, the voices more distinct, urging them to do unspeakable things. The radio would play eerie music from a bygone era, sending shivers down their spines. And then one night, as they were driving home from a dinner party, the car suddenly accelerated, racing down the empty road at breakneck speed. Terrified, they tried to brake, but the car wouldn't slow down. It was like something was pushing the accelerator, urging them faster and faster towards the edge of town. They screamed for help, but their voices were drowned out by the roar of the engine. Just when they thought they couldn't take it anymore, the car screeched to a halt, throwing them forward against the dashboard. They sat there panting, shaken but alive, the car seemingly back to normal. But the terror wasn't over yet. The next day, the couple found strange scratches on the car, as if someone had tried to claw their way out from the inside. And then, the husband started to act strangely, his eyes empty, his movements robotic. He would spend hours in the garage, tinkering with the car, muttering to himself in a language no one could understand. And then, One day, he disappeared, leaving behind only a trail of blood that led to the garage. The wife was never the same after that. She would sit by the window, staring out at the road, waiting for her husband to return. But he never did. And the car sat in the garage, silent but for the whispers that echoed through the empty space, a grim reminder of the horrors that lurked within its sleek metallic shell.